So continuing further on the chaining of jobs or chaining of Apex code using Queueable Apex, this is how it's going to work. So there is here we have a small code sample. So if you see, this is a Queueable Apex class, okay, which has implemented Queueable interface. Now what we do, we write our code here. We would have our code here, which gets executed, and at the end of this code, we will have the system.enqueue job, which will call the second job. So from the first job, what you're going to do, we are going to call the second job. So the second job that we are calling, this also needs to be a Queueable Apex. This also needs to implement Queueable interface. So this ways, what you can do, you can have one Queueable Apex running, and if you want the second Queueable Apex to run right after the one after the first job, then you can do it that way. All right, again, now since it's a Queueable Apex, it does not guarantee that the second job will run immediately after the first job. The method that we have defined here, the system.enqueue job method, the core purpose of this method is to put the Apex code or to put your Queueable Apex class into the job queue. Again, it would behave in the same way. If the system resources are not available, then it is going to wait in the job queue, and the moment system resources become available, at that point of time, it will get executed. All right, a few things for us to understand, in terms of chaining of jobs. So if you're working with your developer edition or any trial organization, usually Salesforce allows that the stack depth of chain to be maximum 5, right? Which means you can have total number of jobs in a chain to be 5, and this is basically only meant for your developer edition, trial orgs, etc., right? However, for your enterprise and unlimited edition, there is no such limit, which means Salesforce has not specified what can be the length of the chain that you can define, right? But of course, if you're working with your developer edition or a trial organization, it will be the max length stack depth which is allowed is 5, which means the first job, second job. So you can basically chain 4 jobs actually. You'll have to schedule or enqueue the second job from the first job. So first job is going to be there, and then second, third, fourth, fifth. So that is the maximum depth that you can have. Okay. Now another important thing here, or another important consideration here, is you can add only one job from an executing job. So which means from this executing job, let's say this is my Apex code, I cannot have one job called and the second job called. No, I cannot do this. All right, so what we have to do, we have to have job, let's say we have to have job 1. From there I can call job 2. From there I can call job 3. From there job 4. Okay, let's say from there job 4, and from there job 5, and this phase. I mean, for developer edition, this is the limit. Your developer edition or trial org, this is the limit. Okay, but if it's an enterprise org or your usual unlimited edition, enterprise edition, etc., will not have a limit on this. So you can continue to go this way. However, you can just call one job from an executing job. So you cannot call multiple. So there has to be, if we say there's a job 1 is the parent and job 2 is the child, so it's kind of a 1-to-1, right? So you can have only one child job executing from the parent job. Correct? Okay, so that's about chaining of Apex jobs. We'll talk a little more on Queueable Apex. The next thing that we have to understand is about understanding any specific delays that we want to put for a Queueable Apex. Now, earlier we have discussed about it, that Queueable Apex gets executed when system resources become available, and that when system resources become available completely depends on the system. So it can get executed immediately, it can get executed after a few minutes, or maybe after an hour also, right? So that is not completely controlled. However, in some cases, you may want to start the job with a specified delay, right? So you cannot control when it will get executed, but what you can do is you can at least define a minimum delay, that okay, fine, at least do a minimum delay. So if the job is enqueued right now, you may want to say that okay, this should get executed only after 5 minutes and not before that, right? So that is what we call it as specified delay. So to add queueable job to the asynchronous execution queue with a specified minimum delay, you can define this you can specify that time that your job gets into the job queue only with that specific delay. So that can be, and the limit, the range which we can define for that is 0 to 10 minutes. So you are allowed to define a range from 0 to 10 minutes to specify a delay. So the moment your system.enqueue job is called, and if you have specified the delay, then your job will get into the job queue with that particular delay. Now, how do we define that? So, here is the method which can be used. So if you look into this, so this delay can be 0 to 10, right? 0 will be, of course, no delay. Immediately it gets into the job queue. But if you define a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is in minutes. So if you define 5, then what happens? It will get into the job queue 5 minutes after the system.enqueue job method is called, right? So this is another example code, right? So if I define an integer delay in minutes, and this is equal to 5, I can write my system.enqueue job this way. And here, this parameter can be your delay in minutes, right? And what you can define integers there till 10. Okay, so 10 is the maximum. With that, what you can do, you can control the delay. Now, why would we want to have that delay? Sometimes once your one Queueable Apex has got executed, and if you have chaining of jobs, etc., the second Queueable Apex, you may want to execute, or you may want to put that into the job queue with a bit of delay, just to ensure that you are not hitting against governor limits, etc. So you may want to wait for some time before the second job gets into the job queue. So for that reason, this can be pretty useful. So while we have the option on a Queueable Apex, when we are enqueuing the Queueable Apex job, while we have the option of putting the delay from 0 to 10 minutes, there is an option which is available with the admins also. So if your organization's admin wants to put a default delay for all Queueable Apex, the system admin can also do that. And for system admins, now that is called org-wide default delay for Queueable jobs, right? So what is this org-wide default delay? Org-wide default delay, if the system administrator defines, as the name suggests, org-wide, this will be applicable on all Queueable Apex. Those are enqueued, right? And the range that can be, the default delay range that can be defined is 1 to 600 seconds, right? Which is kind of again 10 minutes, but this needs to be defined in seconds, right? So you have control on how many seconds you can define: 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever you want, right? So with this, what will happen if the system administrator has defined a certain delay? Let's say the system admin has defined 300 seconds delay, then all Queueable Apex jobs, whatever is queued, that will get into the job queue with a delay of 300 seconds by default. It will not immediately get into the job queue, right? However, if there is a delay, the default delay, org-wide default delay is defined, and on an in your system.enqueue job method, if you have also defined delay, then your delay that you have defined in the method will be considered. This will be considered, and the org-wide default delay will be ignored in that particular case, right? So using the if you look into this, it says using the system.enqueue job delay method ignores any org-wide enqueue delay setting. So by default, whatever is applicable for the executions where there is no specific delay which is defined, right? However, if there is a specified delay mentioned in the method, then the system's org-wide default delay will be ignored, right? So these options are available for us to go ahead and control the delay in terms of when the specific job will get into the job queue. The next thing that we will be discussing is Schedulable Apex. We have already discussed about future methods. We have spoken about Queueable Apex. Now the next important or another way of executing asynchronous Apex is Schedulable Apex. As the name itself suggests, schedulable. So this is something which can be scheduled, right? So the idea is very simple. So if I have, I'll give you an example. If I have an Apex code that needs to be executed every Friday 7 p.m., right? I want to execute some code and I want to do it after business hours every Friday, right? So now if I use a Queueable Apex there, what I have to do every Friday, I'll have to go and call that particular method system.enqueue job and put it into the job queue. which is going to be, of course, not a very efficient way of doing it. With Schedulable Apex, the concept remains pretty much same. It is still an asynchronous Apex. It still gets executed similarly, but with Schedulable Apex, or with the schedulable interface which it uses. So with the schedulable interface which Schedulable Apex uses, you have the option to define a schedule, and as per the schedule, let's say my schedule is every Friday 7 p.m. Now, as per the schedule, every Friday 7 p.m. automatically the job will be put into the job queue. So that is the thing. Now, if it is put into the job queue at 7 p.m., does it get executed at 7 p.m.? Possibly no, right? Because it again is an asynchronous Apex. It will wait for the system resources to become available. So the actual execution may happen after 30 minutes. It may happen after 5 minutes. But at 7 p.m., the job will be put in the job queue. So the schedule that we define is when the job will be put into the job queue. Once the job is put into the job queue, it behaves pretty much the same as it was doing for your Queueable Apex. All right. So now, what is Schedulable Apex? Used to invoke an Apex class to run at specified time, and it implements the Salesforce provided schedulable interface. So the schedulable interface, how it is different from Queueable Apex and the Queueable interface. So in Queueable Apex also we were implementing an interface which was Queueable interface. Schedulable interface basically allows us to schedule the class, and it can work with a specified schedule, and automatically based on the schedule it will get into the job queue, right? So as I gave you the example, if I define a schedule of every Friday 7 p.m., automatically it will go and get into the job queue every Friday 7 p.m. All right. Now, schedules can be defined in two ways. So there are two ways of defining the schedule. So of course you will define the code. We will talk about the syntax. We'll look into the syntax. But if we have written the code, now how do we define the schedule? So defining the schedule can be done. So that is going to be outside your actual code. So scheduling can be done in two ways. There is an option to schedule it from an Apex page in the Salesforce UI. So in the Salesforce UI, there is where you see the list of Apex classes. There is an option to schedule Apex, right? So that's a completely UI based option for you. What you can do, you can simply go to that particular page and you can click on a button called Schedule Apex, and you can choose your schedule, right? Daily, monthly, weekly, something like that. All right. And the other option is, if you want greater controls, then what you can do, you can also use a method called system.schedule method. Now the system.schedule method allows you to define your own schedule the way you want, right? So there are two ways. So you define your schedulable Apex, and after that what you do, you define the schedule. So either you go to the user interface and define the schedule, or you can simply define your schedule using the system.schedule method. Okay. And then there is one more thing here, which is, of course, the system.abort job. Now, if you want to, so we have the system.schedule method, right, to schedule something. So what will system.schedule method do? It will schedule your schedulable Apex, right? However, once it is scheduled, now if you want to abort that job, let's say it's going to run every Friday 7 p.m. Now I do not want this execution to happen any further, because the difference between schedulable Apex and your Queueable Apex is Queueable Apex was one-time thing. Now this is a regular thing. Now it's happening constantly, right? So with system.abort job, what you can do, you can abort a job which is getting scheduled on a regular basis, right? So to stop the execution of a job that was scheduled, you can use system.abort job method. Here is the syntax for Schedulable Apex. As I said, this is again very similar. So best way to understand this is that, if you compare this syntax with the Queueable Apex syntax, it will be easy to understand. The only difference is outside this class structure remains pretty much same. It uses a slightly different interface, which is schedulable interface, right? So Queueable interface was different, that allowed you to go and enqueue job into the job queue. Schedulable interface is different, so it implements schedulable interface, which gives it the ability to be scheduled. The rest everything remains same, so pretty much the same thing. It will have one method which is called execute method. So you will define a class. This class will implement schedulable interface. Inside the class there has to be one method. You will define a method inside the class, so it should have one method, and the name of the method has to be execute return something. All right, so that is it. And once you have defined that, all that you have to do is you simply have to go and write your inside that method. You simply have to write your code block. So whatever code you want to execute, you simply need to go and write your code.